All right, it's time to talk with our featured guest, Melissa Turner. Melissa, how's it going?
It's going well. Thank you, Michael. Thank you for having me today.
No, yeah, thank you. Can you kick things off by telling us a bit about your business, who you're serving, what are some of the unique things you're doing for your patients or your clients?
Yeah, sure. Quick 60-second overview. Well, don't hold me to that, but 60-second overview. Hygienist for 20 years. For the last half of my career, I've been focused on non-clinical. So public facing, you'll know me as the tooth girl on Instagram. So influencer and KOL separately from that, because they are two separate things. So that's where the clinical side of me typically will come out. The founder side of me, I am co-founder of the Denobi Awards Red Carpet Gala, which is a wonderful time that we host each year in March. We wanted to call it Dentistry's Oscars, but lots of trademark issues with that. So that's a great, wonderful award program. Along with that, we have the National Mobile and Teledentistry Conference that I'm co-founder of, and also have hosted several podcasts throughout the years as well. The bulk of my time is spent as a brand strategy consultant, both for product and service companies, as well as for individuals, founders who find themselves as the face of their company, whether it's a dentist who just started a practice or whether it's a founder who just launched a toothbrush company. Oftentimes they find themselves as the face of the company and they don't necessarily want to be there or they don't know what to do with it. So I'll help walk them through how they can leverage their personal brand to grow their company. But then I also work with companies on product launches, on brand strategy for their corporation itself, things like that. So that's the bulk of my time behind the scenes.
Interesting. So are you still working as a hygienist or?
Rarely. I do a lot of volunteering, a lot of temping. Yeah. And that's it.
God. Yeah, yeah,
What
no, no, no. It's awesome. So then how did it transition into a brand strategy first and foremost?
Well, I didn't at first. I grew up, millennials, we grew up as the marketing generation, and at first I was like, well, am I really into marketing? Like outside of hygiene, if I could do anything, would it be in marketing? But it's not marketing. It's building the story. It's building a long-term way almost,
Hmm.
to help whoever you're reaching understand what you do and find value in it. So how did I get there? I don't know. It's not like one day I woke up and this is what I'm doing. It's just been
Hmm.
this process of where I find myself after a year. Oh, I find myself here. Okay, let's narrow that down more. Let's figure out where we're going. But I will say, branding, marketing, that has always been important to me. I remember as a kid, my parents owned a business. I was like 9, right? We got our first computer, and my parents were like, Melissa, we don't know how to use this. Can you just make a flyer that we can hang up in the business announcing this thing? And I'm like, sure, I'll do that. Not no idea what I was doing, right? But like
Yeah.
that's how I grew up in this like small business entrepreneur mindset. And my parents were always throwing those kinds of tasks and things at me. And I'm like, okay, I'll just do it. So I have a feeling that's probably where things initiated there.
Interesting. Okay. So then, if we could, let's fast forward a little bit when it comes to branding and building a story, like what you talked about. I would ask you, like, why is it important? But could you give us like a real life scenario of like what we do as human beings every day where we're like, this is why we make this decision because of the branding?
I think it all goes back to we've been marketed at for so long. And a lot of the younger generations now, and I'm including myself in that. I don't know how much longer I can include myself in that, but the younger
Yeah.
generations now want more meaning out of things. They don't want to be marketed at. They want to find value in whatever they're buying. They want to find value in whoever's recommending it. They want to see themselves in that person, but they also want to be challenged to be better, right?
Mhm.
That's just kind of who the younger generations are, including my kids. I have a 9 and 7 year old, and it's fascinating to see how they're being influenced by marketing and businesses and all the information that comes at them. But I would say one of my favorite stories, real life applications about stories about branding, is when my husband and I, before we had kids, we took 4 months, we took 100 days to backpack Europe. It was exhausting. It was completely exhausting.
Yeah.
And we knew we were like, this is the last time we could ever do something like this. We can still stay in hostels, where you don't have to do that. We don't have kids yet. Let's just go all out. So we spent 100 days backpacking Europe. Typically, like every 2 to 3 to 4 days, we were in a new location, a new city, a new country, whatever. And then we'd take some time and rest, at different breaks. But the hardest part, Michael, through all of that was not being able to truly rest. A third of the way in it, we realized anytime we saw a Starbucks, we would go in it and we could truly rest. We could
Mhm.
truly sit there for an hour or maybe longer, maybe half a day if we needed to.
Yeah.
Because it felt good. Starbucks is the cliche for best branding, right? You walk in and any Starbucks, whether we were in Switzerland or England or Italy or Spain, any Starbucks smelled the same, looked the same, felt the same, tasted the same. And that's still to this day the best example of what I can give of the comfort that brands have the ability to give to those who they're reaching out for. And dentistry has a very long way to go in that. It is possible to make some changes now in dental offices to really help our patients in many different ways and consistency and lots of different ways, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But that's probably the best real life example I can give of, oh my gosh, this brand is working for me wherever I go. And it's actually making me feel comfort.
Yeah. Real quick, what did you learn backpacking in those 100 days? Some bullet points that changed your life where you're like, man, I got to share this.
You learn how you can live out of a backpack, first of all. Like, here I am, sure, a female, like, sure, I want all these types of things, but really, 2 pairs of underwear and 2 pairs of shoes and 2 pairs of pants is all you need. Like, you can wear the same shirt every day if you need to. And then the other thing is be careful who you backpack with, because if you're going to be on the road for that long, you don't even understand the arguments you can get into. I remember from my husband and I, we often laugh. We were like halfway through, just exhausted, but loving it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I get mad at him because he would try to cross the street before it would start to blink that you could walk.
Oh, yeah.
Who knows, like, what kind of idiotic arguments and things. But it was consistent. He would just try to cross the street. I'm like, you got to wait till the walk sign is on, dude.
Yeah. Yeah. Things like that. And they say, like, when you're traveling with people, your friends and everything, you got to travel with the right people, or else that could be the last time you talk to each other. And
That's exactly right.
we need 6 month break, kind of a thing. Okay, interesting. So then, where do most practices get it wrong with building a story and branding?
Oh, I'm sure you have your opinions about this too, which I'd like to hear. I think there's just a lack of story and branding with dental offices. When I first came on the scenes 20 years ago, a great dental office was the one who would have cookie cutter websites. And the story of that website was typically the dentist, and there were 4,000 words about his degree and his credentials and why you want to see him as the dentist. And that just doesn't work anymore. A good example of that is I took my daughter and she broke her arm on the playground, fell down, broke her arm. And when I was in triage, when I was in the hospital overnight with her, all these providers in masks and scrubs kept coming into her room for different reasons. And I lost track of who was who. And frankly, by the end of my time there, I didn't care who was who. I was like, as long as the job is getting done, I don't know if that's the doctor or the orderly, no idea. And through that experience, I had to think about who we are as providers in the dental office. That's how our patients see us. They don't care if they see the doctor.
Mm-hmm.
They don't care about the credentials of the dentist. They're fine as long as the service gets done. They trust the corporate entity that's doing it. And as long as there's transparency and pricing and what's happening and options, then really it's less about the actual dentist anymore and more about how the patient feels while they're there. I truly believe that.
Real quick, in the past, how many practices would you say you've worked in pretty consistently?
Well, I've temped in over 100. I mean, I've probably been permanently in 10.
Okay. And overall, out of 100 or the 10, which ones to you were more like that Starbucks feeling where you're like, this is it? Like, this could be a home? None? None at all? So
None.
Which ones would you say was the worst? What were the things that made it that way?
Looking back, it's almost as if many of the dental offices were just replications of each other. You know, I've worked for DSOs and they're the ones who are trying to be consistent with their branding. So that's good. There's a dental office in town here in Portland that does a great job. They've got multiple locations. I've never worked for them, but they're probably one of the ones that from the outside, they have done a kick-ass job with branding and meeting their patients where they're at. From all public-facing perspective, I'm like, they're doing it right, but I haven't worked for them, right? So I know there are the lemons that are good. They're not sour lemons. They're the juicy lemon dental offices that are really doing good things. But in my perspective, a lot of times it is very difficult for independent dentists or even group practice dentists who own or multi-location practice dentists who are still dentist owned It's difficult for the dentist to be the primary clinician and also the CEO of the business. It's a lot of responsibility. Working full time in the clinical chair is exhausting. How is the dentist supposed to do that and put all this into their business at the same time? And branding is a leftover, it's an afterthought right now. We're used to patients having to come to us because of pain. And
Hmm.
that's something that's shifted probably since the early 2000s because the liners came around and they put billions of dollars in marketing into the consumer facing. And so now patients come to us thankfully because they want straight white teeth. But how we're still functioning in most dental practices is under the premise of patients still have to come to us because they're in pain. So they'll always have to come to us. So we don't really need to put much into marketing or branding or even making the patient feel like super wanted or super comfortable because they need us. And that's kind of a juxtaposition in healthcare. It's hard because we have careers, we build our businesses off of patients' disease, and they just have to come to us, right? So like how much do we really have to put into the line item and the P&L for brand awareness or for marketing or for building that story of who we are as a dental practice?
I feel like in that scenario, it sometimes almost looks like the winner would be the lowest price, where they're like fighting for the discounts. And I mean, I've seen it. I grew up in a family like where we're always just save those coupons, right?
Yeah.
Even though we like this sandwich better, like we got to go with that sandwich because it's cheaper, right? Kind of a thing. And
Yeah.
so, is that what happens when there's a lack of branding?
I think that happens, but I don't think it happens as much as it used to because
Mhm.
now going and getting a second opinion is a lot of work. Unless you have a dental office that'll do a virtual appointment, which is they're few and far in between. Like I advocate for that all the time. The most underutilized tool in dentistry right now is virtual care. And everyone's always like,
Mhm.
oh, so you can't do a root canal over your phone. And I'm like, yeah, but there's a lot you can take out of your clinical schedule and do it virtually. And then you save that clinical schedule for the things that actually have to take place in the chair, in the op, right? There's a lot of efficiency that we can create that way. I think right now patients are, instead of going to the bottom line price point, I think they're just going on Yelp. They're going and checking the reviews. They're going and skimming top to bottom on Google just to make sure there's nothing bad about that dentist, nothing that's reported in the
Yeah.
PR, in the news. I think that would trump the bottom line at this point because everyone's just assumes that insurance is going to take care of things. So unless the patient is used to paying out of pocket, price doesn't really matter because insurance will take care of it, right?
That's true. Yeah. So
Yeah.
then you mentioned that there's a practice in Portland right now where you're at, right? What's the difference between trying to be consistent and being consistent? How do we know?
Probably authenticity. So take DSOs, for example. Huge
Mhm.
advocate for DSOs, love them, don't have any issues with them. The problem with having a corporate brand is that there's no face to it. I help coach people on what to do on social media to grow their brands. So I'll say, okay, if you have the same exact post on social media and your company posts it, it maybe will get some likes and clicks. If you have that same post and just copy and paste it into a human being's profile and post it, that's going to always get more engagement than the company will. And the same kind of rule I think applies right now in 2024 when we're looking at branding with dental officers or anything. You can try to push a corporate brand all day long, and the great and the lucky corporate brands like Starbucks that really put a lot into it are going to come across as authentic and personal. But for most companies out there, unless they have an actual face with their company, it's going to be hard to brand the company. And that's where, if anywhere, if dental practices do have a leg up, they still have the dentist owner or the associates that they can put as the face of their company and build a personal brand through the company brand. And that's going to go further than just having a good graphic and color palette. So I think that helps build authenticity within a brand is having a face, a human face be a part of it.
So then, how does the company get more engagement? Like, so let's just say we're trying to get more new patients through Instagram. We just put our picture like on a little logo thing and then our face. You know what I mean? Because what
Yeah.
if we're trying to say, like, no, eventually, Melissa, I want to be able to own multiple practices. The goal may be to sell it. I don't know. That might be pretty cool, but I don't want them to look for me all the time, the patients kind of a thing.
So I would say step back and take a look at your team as a whole And you don't have to put any one face on it. You can put a team photo standing in scrubs with their arms crossed in front of you, but a team photo of just relaxed conversation in scrubs. Or if you had an outing the other week, those are the types of photos that are going to pull people in anyway, because that's what we're attracted to as we scroll our feeds, just the normal photos. And then you have the cringe ones too, but I wouldn't go that route as a business.
Yeah.
Just the normal photos of us being relaxed in a setting. And that can be done through an iPhone, or you can set that up with a professional photographer, which is ideally what I would suggest. Have them come in, bring in pretend patients, pretend like you're going through your day, and have the photographer get these relaxed, in action, natural-ish photos of you and your team doing what you do every day. That way, then the personal brand isn't a single face. It's the idea of this team, of this family almost that you've created. And that can translate then to any of the locations that you have. That's what I would say there.
I've seen people almost start their own profile. So, for example, let's just say the dental market, right? It's the podcast, or I have my own practice called the dental practice, whatever, right? But then I decide to start my own personal one to try to feed. Do you recommend that, or is that like just double duty?
I would always recommend that. And that's exactly when I work with founders, that's exactly what I say. You position yourself as a founder, as a subject matter expert in whatever it is. We'll say dental implants. You're going to be a dental implant subject matter expert, whether you're a clinician or whether you're not. You can take an expertise on it from both directions. So then you have that as your personal brand. You build that up. You could be on the podcast. Podcasts love storytellers, right? That's what we want. Don't want to have a podcast with a corporate brand. We want it to be a person, a storyteller. And so you build that up, and then you build your company brand, and then it feeds off of each other. And then both can be built together.
Create like your own little ecosystem.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. And then so everything's changing kind of a thing, right? With Instagram. I'm just kind of honing in on Instagram because real quick, how many followers do you have on Instagram?
On Instagram, I have 30,000, 40,000. But then overall, I have 100,000 on all.
If you were to tell me like, hey, as a practice owner, start here, dive into this platform, which one would that be?
Well, my first question would be, are you trying to get patients, team members? What are you trying to get from it?
I mean, all of them would be beautiful, but like, I would just say like patients.
Well, my next question would be, what types of patients do you want?
Do you get this a lot where they're like all kinds, everyone who needs help? But I would say, and I hate saying quality patients because who doesn't? Who wants like non-quality, right?
Most dentists are going to want patients that can pay and patients that will show up. Just to completely generalize, we're going to say that most dental practices want the Gen X, the millennials who are married and have kids, and then the boomers who are still with it.
Yeah.
Those are the three that most people want. Most of those folks are on Facebook right now. So that's where I would send to get all three of those at once. I'd say go to Facebook. Instagram, if you want the younger generations. TikTok, if you want the real young generations, right?
Okay. And then how would the strategy be now going forward? Let's just say we started Facebook. Is it a Facebook page that we start or our own personal? And then do we just upload videos like those little shorts?
So I would say definitely have a Facebook page for the company. If there is a single practice owner, if it's a one single practice owner, I would say definitely have a page for that person as well. I know Facebook doesn't like this, but I would also say have a regular profile for that practice owner as well. There's different algorithms that play differently for each of those things. Getting your team involved in social media is a hot topic that I get asked about a lot. I've worked in practices where they required us to like and follow the practice page, and I did not want to have anything to do with them. So I did not do that, even though it was required, right? You can't require an employee to do anything unless you're paying them for it, for their time. So just be aware of that. If you want your team to share your posts, there's a job available, or do anything on social media, then be prepared to reimburse them for their time to do that. And also, some people don't want to be on social media or don't want to be associated with your practice on social media. So getting your team buy-in about promoting your practice on social media is a very sticky subject. And I could go into that for hours, but you can't force them to do it, really. That if you can, if they are bought in and want to naturally promote the practice, that goes a very long way. But then that goes to creating a team environment that is built on workplace wellness, team culture, respecting one another, actively listening, creating that really good culture where they want to just naturally promote it and where they will promote it. That's a whole different hour too, Michael.
So then, because I see that a lot where some team members are fantastic. I mean, you see them like making funny stuff with their doc, all these things. And then you see some who you just see a picture of the whole team on their profile and then that's it. One's bought in, I would assume, right? And one's not fully bought in. What are some principles we can start implementing right now to slowly have them buy in?
Yeah, to have the team buy in.
Mm-hmm.
There's three things that I know our patients want right now. And I've been saying this since COVID, so this is nothing new. But our patients want it. But the fun thing is our teams want it as well. I have a course about staffing, and the whole premise of it is no matter who you are, if I'm buying something, I want transparency with it. I want convenience with it, and I want flexibility with it if I'm purchasing something, right? So that's why Amazon, all these Uber Eats, all these things exist. It used to be before COVID that the younger generations wanted it. After COVID, now all of us want flexibility, transparency, and convenience in everything we do. And so when we translate that to our team members, how are you being transparent with your team members? I'm not saying tell them the inner workings of your actual business, but I'm saying let's create communication systems and processes that work, that help them feel safe. There's a lot of dental practices out there that don't even have an employee handbook. They don't have contracts with their employees, and they need to because we all need to live by systems and guidelines. It helps everything we do. And so being transparent in those ways help. Providing a workplace that's flexible. Example for you, there are many associates and hygienists I know who cannot take off work unless they find somebody to replace them. It makes sense from a practice owner perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
But from an employee perspective, it's like, wait, hold up. It's not efficient. And so there's that. So being flexible in how you have your workforce, how you've built that up. You can use temps, you can use the contingent or a flex workforce even to help fill in the gaps when you need it as a practice owner. And then convenience, like how convenient is your workplace for your team members? One easy thing is to pull in virtual appointments. If you have virtual appointments, your team members can really work from wherever they are. You know, it's still kind of a new concept for us, but that makes it more convenient for the team members, but also more convenient for the practice owner as well. The more automation and digitalization and AI and virtual care that you can pull in to the clinical model and the business model of your dental practice, the more convenient it becomes. And then the practice owner benefits, the team benefits. So to me, that's how you get buy-in from your team, is addressing those three things. And if you address those three things, that's going to trickle to your patients too, because then you have virtual care for your patients. You've built a team culture that's going to reflect well with your patients that will help retain the patient and it'll help retain the staff. And if you're building a business model that's convenient, it's going to trickle down to the patient as well. So bonus on both ends there.
I liked it a lot. So do you recommend like on our team meeting, talk about, hey, how can we have more flexibility today? Or all three, how can we have more transparency and convenience? Should we mention that all three?
It's definitely a conversation worth having and worth having repeatedly. If a dental practice doesn't have team culture or doesn't have a workplace wellness initiative going on, that's fine. And a lot say they do and they really don't. So that's also something to take a look at. But a good place to start is just having a relaxed team meeting and say, hey, if we could create a mission statement for our practice, what would it be? Let's bounce around some ideas. You don't have to make the mission statement that day or a vision statement. Just collectively starting to discuss these things. And then through that, you can talk about, okay, what can we do to make this a more convenient place to work? What can we do to make this a more flexible place to work? You know, these conversations are very valuable. And a lot of times it's not, same with when I'm with a patient, it's not about me talking. It's about listening. As the practice owner, just listen, actively, truly hear those around you. And there's no pressure to change what you're doing. It's just letting them have a voice and allowing your team to be heard goes a really long way. And that'll help with buy-in as well.
Okay, I like that. And then something you mentioned is there's a practice in Portland that you feel you haven't worked for them, but they're doing things right. They're the juicy lemon, right? And I'm sure you can see it and then you kind of know their inner workings a little bit or like what they're doing without even being in there. What would you say they're doing right? And can you give us like a checklist of it?
I think the biggest thing is they understand the community which they're serving. Portland, Oregon. We're very liberal here. There's a very large LGBTQ plus community, right? So they don't target that community. There's no need to target. They just are that community. So a lot of their team members are a part of that community, right? A lot of their outreach, they do, I think, monthly free days of care for anybody that needs it in the community. So in their social feeds, it's them out in the community. It's never them in scrubs with their arms crossed. It's
Mm.
never pictures of before and after with teeth. Patients don't want to see teeth. They don't care about that. It's never pictures of bloody teeth or tooth facts. It's literally being a part of the community which they serve. Now, I'm
Hmm.
not sure how that would change if they, moved to Idaho or moved to Virginia or Texas. Like, would they still adapt to those communities? I would hope so. I don't know. But at least for right now, most of their locations are within Portland. So it really works for them to help to adapt. It is one and the same. Their team members are those in which they serve with services.
Gotcha. I like that. So they're not trying to target, you know what I mean, specific people. They just are that community kind of a thing.
Yeah.
For branding, it's
Mhm.
just who they are kind of a thing.
And I think too, coinciding with that, since COVID and before COVID, since the iPhone, since webinars, since social media, we're so used to having strong virtual presence as companies, as individuals. And quite frankly, we've forgotten that we can build an in-person presence that is equally as impactful or effective with sales. And that's where marketing comes in, right? We market on social media, we market virtually, like all of those things. That's great. But we've forgotten that the counterpart to that is building an in person presence where you are. Even if it's just, I don't know, if I'm a practice owner and I know that the gym down the street has my insurance, what if I go and just have a gym membership and get to know the people there? Surely they'll find out that I take their insurance and they'll come back to me, even if it's just that. Or you can do free days of care, go out and do screenings and sponsor the
Yeah.
local soccer team and things like that. So often we've forgotten that there is this in-person presence that we still need to have as business owners, but can't rely everything on virtually. It's just right now we're so inundated with so much information over our feeds that it doesn't go anywhere. It's starting to lose its value, I think, in my mind.
Yeah. We need that like person to person interaction kind of a
Yeah.
thing. Yeah, I
Mhm.
agree. Right now, transitioning a little bit more to like I guess practice ownership and also a hygienist, right? What strategies have you found most effective for dental practices looking to improve patient retention?
I'm going to sound like a broken record, but one of the biggest, most important, most significant things is virtual care. Because when we're looking at patient retention, we're looking at a couple different things right now. We're looking at the boomers beginning to lose autonomy. Maybe they can't drive when it's dark anymore, right? Maybe they don't feel comfortable even driving after 4 p.m. or 2 p.m.
Hmm.
And that's only going to get worse. And they're probably the majority of our patient populations right now across the board. If you can help them get used to having virtual appointments, then they can still be active patients, even if they cannot get in your practice door. And that's one of the things when we talk about patient retention, it's not just retaining the new patient that walked in last week. It's all these patients that you have worked hard to care for throughout the years. That virtual care is really the trick for that. They can still be active patients. And then I have to put a plug for mobile dentistry in because I'm an avid fan for that. But
Hmm.
once you realize, oh, I can still see 72-year-old Bob who can't drive anymore. I can still see him through virtual appointments. But why don't I just have my hygienist go do the cleaning at his house, right? And then when she's there, he can clean his wife's teeth. The neighbors will start to get nosy. We can clean their teeth. Like it just starts to build that way. Once we start thinking outside of the brick and mortar, it's like, oh my gosh, like I don't have to build a new practice and spend millions of dollars on building a new practice, hoping patients come to me. I can go to them in places they're more comfortable. It's a whole different like scenario for logistics, but it's really good. So patient retention, virtual care for that. And then also so many generations are being very nomadic right now, whether it's the college age kids who are going off to college in a different state, or the millennials who just like to move around, or the younger generations are going to be even more movable within state to state. And now with virtual care, it's still possible for you to be that dental practice, that dental provider for them, even though they're across the country. So, and
Hmm.
there's a lot going on right now with the Dentist and Dental Hygiene Compact with licensure issues and stuff, where licensure is no longer going to be state to state in the future. They're going to have reciprocity within these states, which is wonderful, which will help solve that teledentistry, that virtual care issue when you're seeing somebody in a different state. So, huge.
Hmm. That is huge. Wow. So then what software would you recommend when it comes to, I guess, starting off or doing this?
For practice management software.
Yeah, for like virtual, for,
Okay.
hey, could we just do it through Zoom or a teleconferencing? You know what I mean? Or what software would be the best for that right now?
There's different types of software. A lot of the software regulations were loosened over COVID, and a lot of those are no longer enacted right now. So it used to be
Hmm.
you could Zoom. But really, if you keep it simple, there's teledentistry platforms out there that are complete practice management software packages. Then there are some that are simply texting and video that's HIPAA compliant, that's encrypted, that has all the bells and whistles to it. And then there's some that are patient facing. So that if a
Hmm.
patient has, an emergency, they virtually hook up with a dental provider, and then that platform refers to you as a local dentist. So there's lots of things happening like that as far as software, and it's kind of all across the gamut right now. We're going to see some consolidation with teledentistry software, in the next 10 years. But the reality is, in 5 years from now, we won't even be talking about teledentistry or virtual care because it's just going to be a part of what we're doing. It is what it is, part of dentistry. It's just what we do.
Okay, that's interesting. So then
Mhm.
right now, I guess with future trends like that, looking ahead, what do you believe are the top trends or changes that practice owners should be preparing for in the next 5 to 10 years?
Definitely patients wanting more flexibility in the offerings of the dental practice. What I wouldn't give for a dentist or hygienist to come to my house and clean my teeth, even though I'm a hygienist, and clean my teeth, clean my kids' teeth, and
Yeah.
everybody on the block at the same time. Like what I wouldn't give for that, but it's not possible just because there's not enough providers in my
Mhm.
area that do that. So I think that's a big thing that we'll start to see change in the future, especially if I have anything to do with it. It's going to change. But
Yeah.
I think most dental practices will have a brick and mortar still. And then they'll have that virtual arm into the patient's phone and then the mobile arm into their workplace or house or wherever they want to take it. It's easier than it seems. It's really not that difficult in today's world. So
Mhm.
that I think is definitely going to be a big impact. Sure, I'll say AI is going to be a big impact. It already is. I have a course on AI where it walks the audience through the many different ways we already use AI in the patient experience, starting from marketing to when they walk in the door to in the clinical. And then within that, it's how we're going to be using it in the future, things that aren't even on the market yet. So I think just making dentistry more like our regular lives is the theme for the next 10 years. I was talking to a dentist the other day. He's big into technology. He's probably in his mid 60s, I think. And he was talking about how he's making his entire home smart everything. And I looked at him and I said, are you doing that for your dental practice too? And he just laughed. He said, no, why would I do that? And I'm like, oh my God, that's okay. I understand now because it will happen as practice ownership changes. How we use technology outside of the dental practice in our regular lives is just going to start to be ingrained within dentistry as well.
Mhm.
So that's another big shift I know will naturally happen pretty soon.
Yeah. Yeah, to make it smart. That's true. If we do it with our homes, why don't we do it with our practice? I guess because maybe it's like, where do we start? What
Mhm.
cost? You know what I mean? We start thinking of all these things and then we just paralysis by analysis.
Yeah. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? Like
Uh-huh.
I worked for a dentist one time. This was maybe 10 years ago. They still used paper charts and they still used the x-rays where you put it through the machine.
Uh-huh.
I literally said to them, I said, do not change anything because they didn't have the capacity, they didn't have the resources, the team members to change anything. And so I'm like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like that's the only time I'll say it, right? Like just keep
Yeah.
going because they just didn't have the capacity, the strength even as a team to go through those changes.
I think that takes a really good consultant or coach to have that type of discernment and insight to let them know, like, I mean, you could easily go and say, trust me, things are going to get better. If you do this, do it. But if you're like, hey, I know the capacity, I know their thinking ability, I know, you know what I mean? That means you've been with them and you know
Mhm.
what they can handle. So I guess that's where like advice like that works. You know what I mean? Really honed in. then lets us know, hey, Melissa's a really good coach. Like,
Everything I wanted to say, right? I wanted to say this and this, and it will make your life better.
yeah,
I
yeah.
went against everything.
But it's good. It's slowing down, self-restraint. That's good. So then one of the last questions I wanted to ask you is, as someone who has achieved a lot in your field, what personal development practices do you follow to continue growing and staying motivated?
Yeah. What don't I do is really, I dabble in everything. Somebody says I should try this, I'll try that. As far as personal development goes, my methodology is always how can I make positive change? And so just having that ethos keeps me driving and it keeps me almost never ending because I'm like, oh, there's still more that needs to be done. So just that as an ethos, it just continues to help me develop. But then
Mm-hmm.
outside of dentistry, for a long time, for many, many, many years, I just busted. I worked evenings and weekends. And when I had my kids 10 years ago, I realized, okay, now is the time to start setting up boundaries. Now is the time to start like blocking my schedule. I'm going to do this then, this then. That way I can cut off when I need to and not be working anymore. I'm always, always, always networking and learning. I love being in CE courses, but
Mm-hmm.
even a lot of my learning comes from just conversations with either fellow clinicians or founders, things like that. So that helps me continue to learn and be eager and to see what's out there, to see what's next. I'm a musician and I love to garden. So, like when
Mm-hmm.
you talk about personal development, if I'm not doing those things, then I am not personally developing at all. I need to take the time to get out in the dirt and garden and grow my tomatoes and take the time to play music and create things from scratch on the piano or whatever I'm doing. Those things are a huge part of who I am and just keeping myself sane.
Yeah, that's so smart. Put those boundaries up a little bit. And sometimes I feel, I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Melissa, but do you feel like sometimes you have to put those boundaries because you hit that burnout point already? You're like, oh my gosh, I don't want to feel that again. Or
Oh,
do you
yeah.
feel like you just do it before that?
Oh, no, this is all lessons learned.
Yeah.
A lot of it goes back to when I felt like I was really at my lowest after having a hard pregnancy and having kids. You have no energy. Like that first year, that second year, that third year of having kids, it's just like, how can I keep going? It totally is the cliche, put your own oxygen mask on first. And I have to, defy everything in my being to spend another hour with my kids. And I had to say, nope, I need to go watch Netflix and be by myself for a while. That is what I need in this moment so that when I'm with my kids, I can give them 100% of me and not be bitter and not be like, oh my gosh, I don't want to be here, that kind of thing. So it's setting these boundaries with intent, but it's learning from what I've already been through
Hmm.
to be able to, and having a good partner too who can support that and have their own boundaries as well. I think that's the only way to roll these days, at least for me.
Yeah. You've heard of mom guilt, right?
Yeah.
It's like, hey, I'm starting my own practice. And at the same time, I just gave birth, right, to like my second child or my first child or something. But I'm trying to focus on this practice. You know what I mean? And then you get home, you want to spend as much time as you can because you only have like an hour until it's their bedtime. Then you got to go the next day and do it all over again. And so you feel, I guess, that guilt just creeping up, going higher, higher. So whenever you do have moments, I just need to watch Netflix right now. You're not telling yourself that. You're like, how dare you try to do that? I need to be with my kid. I guess how do we combat that? What do we do?
You just be stubborn. That's what you do. You say, it's okay. It's okay. You talk yourself through it. I would guess there's still a good amount of us who were raised by parents who the mom didn't work, right? The mom stayed home. And that's how my mom was for much of my life. She stayed home and I don't even remember clearing the table after we ate dinner. Like she did all that. And looking back, I'm
Uh,
like, gosh, why didn't I help her? Right?
yeah, like the
So
little
it's like,
thing.
and I should say my mom did, we were business owners. So she wasn't just a stay-at-home mom. She did
Hmm.
work, but she did take, the younger years and devote everything to us and my siblings. And so I think you never shake that parent guilt. It just is always there. But for me, I want to help show my daughters that it is possible to have a career, to do what you love. I work 30 hours a week, except when I'm traveling. So,
Hmm.
like, I make sure I cut that off. And they're always like, Mommy, why are you always working? And I'm like, I'm not really. Let me tell you when I was growing up, I never saw my dad.
Yeah.
It's just trying to set a good example for them, I think, is what helps me move past or move through that parent guilt of never giving enough. That old school, I'm going to call it like it is. Mom guilt is old school. That's what I'm going to call it.
Mhm.
We're going to move forward.
Yeah, you're right, because you have to eventually like put yourself in that position where you're like, I'm able to give a little bit more percent instead of just being there and giving like 2%, but giving yourself what you need. And then I'm there 100%.
Being a clinician and or practice owner in dentistry, it is not female friendly. Even just being pregnant and having a patient in your lap, it is the weirdest thing, first of all, right? So that's not female friendly. But then once you become a parent, it's not a parent friendly industry. And that's just what it is. Simple fact that like school ends at 3, but yet maybe I see my last patient at 4. And a lot of dental practices I know of won't let me create my own schedule. So I have to find childcare just for that hour. It's things like
Mhm.
this, that virtual care, flexibility, transparency, all of these things coming together are going to help the parents in the industry, the parents who are owning practices, and the parents who are clinicians in the industry. And I'm just going to say this, but how many times do women who are pumping have to do it in the bathroom or their car? That
Mhm.
is disgusting. Like, we need to have these better systems in place to meet the needs of our team members and ourselves too. It'll get there.
Yeah. Awesome, Melissa. Thank you so much for being with us. It's been a pleasure. But before we say goodbye, can you tell our listeners where they can find you?
Find me on LinkedIn or Instagram at the Tooth Girl, Melissa K. Turner on LinkedIn. You're also welcome to visit my website at melissakturner.com, and you could reach out through that.
Awesome. So that's going to be in the show notes below. And Melissa, thank you so much for being with us. It's been a pleasure, and we'll hear from you soon.
Thank you, Michael.